Man of American Education. Horace Mann took a large stand in education. He wanted even the poor to get a first-class education. Mann is important because without his influence, the world might not have compulsory education. Mann is relevant to the topic this year since the theme is taking a stand in history. Mann realized without compulsory education, people were not learning enough and growing up to be responsible and wise like they needed to be to have a strong and successful future. Mann's influence affected changes that still likely impact students and teachers today. Horace Mann took a stand because he cared for the children and people of the United States of America.
Mann was born in poverty in Franklin, Massachusetts on May 4, 1796.
Horace Mann had two siblings, Stephen Mann and Louise Mann. His parents were Thomas Mann and Rebecca Stanley Mann.
He was educated in a one-room schoolhouse that was very unorganized. His school was underfunded and had very little academic resources. Mann was lucky if he even got 6 weeks of school in 1 year.
Mann was 20 years old when he was admitted to the sophomore class at Brown University. Further in his life, Mann noticed that public schools were not teaching kids enough and private expensive schools were.
Mann understood that education was key to solving mankind's social ills. He had 6 principles for education.
1. The public should no longer remain ignorant.
The first principle of education talks about how the public should no longer remain ignorant to the education what the children were learning. Mann wanted people to realize that children were not learning enough.
2. That such education should be paid for, controlled, and sustained by an interested public.
The second principle talks about how if people work together, they can pay enough money to help sustain a school or more schools to teach children and make sure they get a good education. That's why, in principle number 1, they don't want people to be ignorant.
3. That this education will be best provided in schools that embrace children from a variety of backgrounds.
The third principle talks about both the first and second principle. By doing both the first and second, that people can achieve the third. When the people work together and pay money to sustain schools, they can have teachers that want to teach. They will have schools that are educating children and children that want to learn.
4. That this education must be non-sectarian.
The fourth principle talks about how education should be non-sectarian, which can help with bullying, and that way kids don't get physically or emotionally hurt because of their beliefs or race.
5. That this education must be taught by the spirit, methods, and discipline of a free society.
The fifth principle is leaning towards the teachers. When they teach, they need to focus on their methods of teaching and discipline.
6. That education should be provided by well-trained professional teachers.
The sixth principle talks about how schools should look into who they hire and who they have working for them. They should look into people who want to teach and have a good record, not just people who are doing it for the money.
Though these principles were written in 1868, Horace Mann's ideas are still relevant today.
He had a wife named Charlotte Messer, which divorced him. Then he remarried to Mary Tyler Peabody Mann. They had 3 kids, George, Benjamin, and Horace Mann Jr.
Mary grew up in Salem, Massachusetts. She left her home when she was 18 to go and teach in Maine. When Mary was in her mid-20s, she moved to Boston to help teach young children with her sister. Later, in 1833, Mary went with her 6th sister to Cuba. During 1853, she moved into her brother's house to start teaching and tutoring kids in the Italian language. Mary went back to Salem and made her own successful school. In 1837, Mann became the secretary to the Massachusetts Board of Education. Mary helped Horace Mann sustain a good public image. She also wrote books on her free time.
There were 3 people on the Massachusetts Department of Higher Education: Horace Mann, Josiah Quincy, and Junior James Carter.
Horace Mann was in office at the U.S. House of Representatives for 5 years, from April 1848 to April 1853.
He had a special wig developed to speed modernizations. He did his job well. He made compulsory education, which advanced the world. It made it so kids had goals in learning and had to know certain things to advance. When this happened, schools were not only producing children who learned, but children who were advancing.
While Mann served as Senate on the Massachusetts Board of Education, with history going back to 1647, was suffering with the amount of education that was declining. Soon, a resourceful reforming movement emerged, and in 1837 the state created the nation's first Board of Education. Rebecca Stanley Mann, mother of Horace Mann, was born on February 23, 1761 in Attleboro, Bristol, Connecticut. Rebecca then married Deacon Thomas Mann on June 29, 1786, although Rebecca unfortunately died on March 19, 1837.
Thomas Mann, father of Horace Mann, was a farmer and a hard worker. His father died when he was only 13, but his father inspired him and left an amazing impression on him. Mann was a child who kept his feelings and injuries to himself. He loved his mother and respected her. Although Horace Mann was super smart and creative, he was still opposed. John Taylor Gatto was against public education because in 30 years of him teaching, he realized that not only kids were not learning, they were bored. John Taylor Gatto may not have been alive during Mann's time, but he opposes public education. Horace Mann died on August 2, 1853 in Yellow Springs, Ohio at the age of 63. He was buried at the North Burial Ground in Rhode Island. His cause of death was unknown. It could have been old age, drug overdose, or sickness. Horace Mann left a great impression on the world.